They say life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die. For me, it wasn't my life, it was hers. My wife, Rachel, was pinned beside me in the crushed car. Blood dripped down her temple, mixing with the rain that poured through the shattered windshield. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air, the world outside a cacophony of sirens and screams. "Hold on, Ratch," I murmured, my voice shaking as I tried to keep pressure on her wound. Her eyes fluttered open, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Jason, I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry? For what?" "Stay with me," I barked, desperation clawing at my chest. She turned her head slightly, her face a pale mask of anguish. "I never told you about him." "Him? What are you talking about?" My hands trembled as I tried to focus on keeping her conscious. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "I love him, Jason. I've loved him for months. I didn't mean for it to happen." The world froze. Sirens, the rain, the searing pain in my arm. All of it disappeared. All I could hear were her words, like shards of glass piercing my heart. What do you mean? Who?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes began to close, her head slumping forward. I screamed her name as paramedics tore open the car door. They pulled her away from me, their hands efficient and emotionless, as if they weren't holding my entire world in their arms. The chaos swallowed me whole, but one thing was clear. Whatever life I'd known up until that point had ended in that mangled wreck. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Rachel lay in the bed, her face pale and bandaged. The doctors had done their job. She was alive. But as I sat in the chair next to her, the silence between us felt heavier than the wreckage we had crawled out of. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting mine. For a moment, I saw relief in her gaze, but it quickly turned to something darker. Guilt. "Jason," she croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't talk," I said, standing to pour her a glass of water. "You need to rest." She shook her head weakly. "No. I need to say this." My hands froze mid-pour, the water spilling over the edge of the glass. I set it down and turned to face her, my chest tightening. "Why now, Ratch?" My voice cracked as I spoke. "Why tell me that? In the car, of all places." Her tears spilled over, streaking her cheeks. "I thought we were going to die. I couldn't leave without telling you the truth." I clenched my fists at my sides, my mind racing with fragments of her confession. "I love him. I've loved him for months." "Who is he?" I demanded, my tone sharper than I intended. Her lips quivered as she hesitated. His name is Tom." "Tom." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Tom, the neighbor we'd been inviting over for barbecues. Tom, who had helped fix our fence last summer. Tom, who had always been just a little too friendly. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the sterile room. "Tom? Are you serious? All those times we had him over. All those times I trusted him. I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed. It just did. He listened to me in a way I didn't feel you did anymore." Her words felt like daggers, but I forced myself to remain calm. "So that's your excuse? You were feeling unheard, so you found someone else?" "It wasn't like that," she pleaded. "It wasn't just physical, it was emotional." I shook my head, stepping back as if distance could protect me from the betrayal seeping into my soul. "You were supposed to be mine, Rachel. My partner, my wife. And now you're telling me you gave your heart to someone else." Her face crumpled, and she reached out for me, but I couldn't move. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and felt like a stranger had taken her place. "I saved you, Rachel," I said quietly, the weight of my emotions pressing on every word. "But you destroyed me." Her sobs filled the room as I turned and walked out the door, the sound echoing in my ears like a death knell for our marriage. The days that followed were a blur. I kept myself busy, organizing insurance claims, speaking to the police about the accident, and running errands. Anything to avoid being in that house. Rachel was discharged from the hospital a week later, but the tension between us was unbearable. She tried to talk to me, But every time I saw her, all I could hear were her words in the car. I love him. I've loved him for months. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she cornered me in the living room. "Jason, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I looked up from my drink, the glass cold against my palm. "What's left to say?" "I made a mistake," she began, her eyes glistening. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jason. I was lost, and Tom, he was just there at the wrong time." "Wrong time," I repeated, my voice dripping with bitterness. "You mean the time when you were supposed to be my wife? When we were supposed to be building a life together?" She sank onto the couch, her hands wringing together. "It's over, Jason. It ended weeks ago. I told him it was a mistake. I chose you." "Chose me?" I stood, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You don't get to use that word, Rachel. You didn't choose me, you betrayed me. You threw away everything we had for what? For some thrill." Her sobs filled the room, but I couldn't find any sympathy in my heart. "Not anymore. I'll never be able to unhear what you said in that car," I continued, my voice shaking. "Your last breath. The words you thought were your final ones were for him, not me." She flinched as if I'd struck her, but I couldn't stop now. "Do you know what that feels like, Rachel? To realize, in the moment I thought I was losing you forever, that I never truly had you at all." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Sorry doesn't fix this," I said. "Sorry doesn't erase the image of you with him. It doesn't erase the betrayal." The room fell into silence, her sobs the only sound. I turned to leave, but she stopped me with a quiet plea. "What happens now, Jason?" I hesitated, my back to her. "I don't know, Rachel. But I do know one thing. Things will never be the same." 2 weeks later, I moved out of the house. We told the kids it was a trial separation. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Rachel's betrayal had driven a wedge between us that no amount of apologies could bridge. The last time I saw her, she handed me a letter. "If you ever want to read it," she said softly, her voice raw with emotion. I took the letter but never opened it. It sat on my nightstand like a silent witness to everything we'd lost. Months passed, and life moved on. I poured myself into work, trying to rebuild what little sense of normalcy I could muster. But at night, when the world grew quiet, the memories would creep in. The accident, her words, and the hollow feeling that followed. Rachel stayed in the house with the kids, and we worked out a co-parenting arrangement. Every time I dropped them off, I saw her standing in the doorway, her eyes full of regret. But the damage was done. And the hardest part? I still loved her. That was the cruelest betrayal of all. How my heart refused to let go, even when I knew it was broken beyond repair.